Because of a noisy water pump in my yard, I was served with a joint complaint from all 30 households in my building. They blocked my doorway, filled with righteous indignation, demanding I dismantle it immediately. This piece of junk hums and buzzes. It's giving me a splitting headache. Tear it down now, or we'll be back every day. Without a word, I dismantled the pump right in front of them. 2 days later, sewage from the entire building's basement backed up. The homes of my 30 neighbors instantly became waterfront properties. They came to me, crying and shouting, begging for help. I just shrugged. Weren't you the ones who told me to dismantle the pump? It was 7:30 on a Friday night, precisely the time when every household was most relaxed after dinner. The air was a mixture of the aroma of food and the clamor of television shows. My doorway, however, was impenetrably blocked by a dense crowd of people. Lin Montag, open the door. I know you're in there. A shrill, high-pitched female voice pierced through my security door, heavy with a commanding tone. It was Annie Zhang. She was the opinion leader of our building, the lead dancer of the public square dancing troupe. Before retiring, she had been a mid-level manager at some organization, and her air of authority had yet to fade. I put down my book and looked through the peephole. A dark mass of people crowded the hallway, every face etched with the same emotion, self-righteous anger. Auntie Zhang stood at the very front, hands on her hips, her neck stretched out long like a rooster ready for a fight. Behind her, there were young people recording with their phones, middle-aged people watching the spectacle with their arms crossed, and a few curious children being held by their parents. 30 households of neighbors. Almost all of them had turned out. They were like a pack of hunters, and I, in their eyes, was the prey. I pulled the door open. The clamor outside paused for a second, then, like a lit barrel of dynamite, erupted with an even more ferocious wave of sound. Linamo, you finally decided to come out. That wretched pump in your yard has to be dismantled right now. Annie Zhang got straight to the point, her spittle nearly spraying my face. That's right. It hums and buzzes all day. My elderly father has a bad heart. The noise has kept him from sleeping well for days, a man chimed in. My kid has the college entrance exams this year. Your noise is deliberately stopping them from studying, another woman shrieked. This is a common area. Why do you have to install this thing privately? It's an illegal structure. It must be dismantled. Dismantle it. Dismantle it. Dismantle it. All sorts of accusations, complaints, and demands intertwined, forming a massive wave of sound that battered my eardrums. I calmly scanned each and every person. Their expressions, that sense of justice born from having a righteous cause and occupying the moral high ground, were truly a sight to behold. It was as if I weren't their neighbor, but a villain who had committed a heinous crime. In the crowd, I saw Xiao Wang, a tenant who had just moved in. He stood near the back, a look of reluctance and unease on his face. He looked like he wanted to say something but didn't dare, and finally, after being nudged by others, he also raised his fist. How ironic. I pushed up the glasses on the bridge of my nose. My gaze behind the lenses was calm and placid. I didn't try to argue why the pump was there, nor did I explain the reason it worked day and night without stopping. I knew that explaining things to a group of people who only want to believe what they already think is the most foolish and futile thing in the world. They didn't need the truth. They needed a target they could attack at will, a scapegoat to blame for all the dissatisfactions in their lives. I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it clearly cut through all the noise. Are you sure you want it dismantled? My calmness made the countless insults they had prepared get stuck in their throats. Annie Zhang was stunned for a moment, then raised her voice as if my composure was a challenge to her authority. Of course we're sure. 100% sure. If you don't dismantle it today, we'll come and block your door every single day. That's right. Every day. We've already signed a joint petition. If you don't cooperate, we'll go to the media and expose you. The young man who was recording waved his phone, a threatening smile on his face. I nodded, my expression unchanging. Fine. That one word left everyone dumbfounded. They had anticipated my excuses, my resistance, my pleading, but they had never anticipated such swift compliance. I turned and went back inside. Under their suspicious gazes, I brought out a toolbox from the storage room. Then, in front of everyone, I walked over to the sewage pump in the yard, the one they called the main culprit. Wrench, pliers, screwdriver. The clanking of metal tools echoed in the silent hallway, crisp and sharp. I didn't hesitate. I cut the power, loosened the bolts, and removed the pipes. My movements were as skilled as a professional repairman's. The neighbors looked at each other, their righteous expressions on their faces slowly morphing into a gloating sense of schadenfreude. Auntie Zhang's grin stretched to her ears, her eyes filled with the smugness of a victor. She began to show off to the people around her. See? To deal with this kind of person, you have to play hardball. He's a soft persimmon. If you don't squeeze him, you won't get any juice. A low chuckle rippled through the crowd. About 20 minutes later, the buzzing monster was completely dismembered by me, turned into a pile of cold, scattered parts on the ground. I straightened up, dusted off my hands, and looked at the group of satisfied victors at the door. It's dismantled, I said. The world was finally quiet. Saturday morning, the sun was bright. Without the hum of the water pump, the entire building was indeed much quieter. I drew the curtains. In the courtyard, the pile of dismantled parts gleamed with a metallic luster under the sun, like a silent corpse. The neighborhood WeChat group was livelier than ever. Early in the morning, Auntie Zhang couldn't wait to announce last night's glorious victory in the group. Dear neighbors, through our collective efforts, the illegal water pump in 101 that was disturbing the residents was personally dismantled by him last night. From now on, everyone can finally get a good night's sleep. A long string of Auntie Zhang is mighty immediately followed. Auntie Zhang is the one with the solutions. As soon as she stepped in, the problem was solved. Finally, we can let out a sigh of relief. Let's see if he dares to be so arrogant in the future. This kind of selfish person should be taught a lesson. Let's celebrate the victory. Shall we go to the restaurant downstairs for a big meal tonight? Auntie Zhang, buoyed by the flattery, sent another long voice message, her tone full of smugness, bragging about how she had debated everyone and forced me to surrender my arms. I scrolled through the chat history with a blank expression. Every piece of flattery and praise seemed like a prelude to the impending disaster. My phone vibrated. It was a private message from Xiao Wang. Brother Lin, about last night. I'm really sorry. What was really going on with that water pump? His tone was tinged with guilt and probing. I typed a few words in reply. It was everyone's choice. On Xiao Wang's end, it showed the other person is typing, but after a long time, no new message came. Perhaps he read something into my 6 words, perhaps not. It didn't matter anymore. I turned off my phone, ignoring the disturbances of the outside world. I made a cup of coffee, turned on my computer, put on my headphones, and the whole world had nothing to do with me. The sounds of fighting in games and explosions in movies became my only background noise. I was home alone, playing games, watching movies, ordering takeout. Leisurely, at ease, as if I wasn't the one who had been cornered and besieged at my door by more than 30 households last night. Outside the window was the festive harmony of the neighbors' victory. Some were strolling downstairs, loudly discussing last night's heroic feat. Some were hanging laundry on their balconies, humming happy tunes. Auntie Zhang even organized a small square dance in the open space downstairs, with the music blasting loud enough to shake the heavens. That noise was much louder than my water pump, but no one protested, because it was the collective's noise, the correct noise. This stark contrast struck me as incredibly absurd. They celebrated a victory for which they had personally sown the seeds of disaster, while I, the only one who knew the truth, was just an indifferent bystander, calmly awaiting the arrival of Judgment Day. Saturday night, the sky was as gloomy as a heavy block of lead. At 7 p.m., the city's meteorological station issued a yellow alert for a rainstorm, reminding citizens to take precautions. On the television news, the anchor reported in a clear voice, "It is expected that from tonight to tomorrow during the day, our city will experience a period of heavy rainfall, with possible thunderstorms and strong winds in some areas." I walked to the window and glanced at the dark sky outside. The air was hot, humid, and sticky, carrying the oppressive feeling of an impending storm. I silently closed all the doors and windows and went to check the waterproof sandbags I had prepared at the entrance. Everything was ready. In the neighborhood group, the current excitement had nothing to do with the weather forecast. Auntie Zhang was cheerfully organizing tomorrow's square dance activities, discussing which new team uniform to wear. "It's going to rain tomorrow, Annie Zhang. The weather forecast said so." "A heavy storm," someone reminded her. Annie Zhang immediately replied disdainfully. "When has the weather forecast ever been accurate? Besides, this is heaven itself being happy, wanting to celebrate our victory. What's a little rain to be afraid of?" Her supporters immediately chimed in. "Exactly, a little rain will cool things down. Annie Zhang is right. Don't be scared by the weather forecast." Amidst the atmosphere of peace and celebration, a discordant voice suddenly appeared. "I don't know why, but I feel like our basement is a bit damp. And there's a strange smell," said Brother Zhao, who lived on the second floor. The group chat fell silent for a few seconds. A voice message from Annie Zhang quickly popped up, her tone tinged with annoyance at having her mood spoiled. "Oh, for goodness sake, old Zhao, you're always making a fuss over nothing. This building is over 20 years old. Isn't it normal for the basement to be a little damp? Wasn't it like this before? Don't scare yourself. That's right, all old buildings are like this. Maybe it's about to rain, so it's the dampness returning." Brother Zhao said no more, and the cheerful atmosphere returned to the group. They continued discussing their plaza dance moves and who had bought what new things. No one gave the slight dampness and strange smell a second thought. They had long been accustomed to ignoring such insignificant signs, just as they had selectively ignored the true purpose of the water pump in my courtyard. I turned off my phone, the screen frozen on Annie Zhang's voice message. "All old buildings are like this." Yes, all old buildings are like this. But the old building of the past had a faithful heart beating tirelessly in the basement, silently expelling all the filth and dampness from its body. Now this heart had stopped beating. I lay back on my bed, listening to the occasional rumble of thunder outside the window. A storm was coming, and those people, immersed in their false victory, knew nothing of it. I closed my eyes, not out of indifference, but because I knew that nothing could be undone. This was their own choice, and they must, and inevitably would, bear all the consequences of that choice. 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. The city had fallen into its deepest slumber. Splash! Raindrops the size of soybeans smashed onto the ground without warning, instantly forming a huge curtain of rain, as if a giant gash had been torn in the sky. Thunder rolled deep within the clouds, and ghastly white bolts of lightning split the night sky, briefly illuminating the city shrouded in the downpour. I was awakened by the loud sound of the rain outside my window. Before I could even get up, my phone began to vibrate frantically. It was the building surveillance app pushing an alert. I clicked on it. It was the camera installed at the entrance to the basement. In the footage, a turbid, yellow liquid was continuously pouring out from the basement stairwell, like ugly snakes winding their way towards the first-floor corridor. That wasn't rainwater. It was sewage mixed with all sorts of household garbage and excrement. My courtyard was on slightly higher ground, so the sewage hadn't flooded in yet. But my neighbors upstairs were probably not so lucky. Help! What is this stuff?" A woman's shriek pierced the quiet of the rainy night, so shrill it was as if she had seen a ghost. It was the voice of Annie Lee from the first floor. Immediately after, a voice message from her popped up in the WeChat group, filled with sobs and terror. "Someone help! Filthy water is coming up from my bathroom drain. It stinks. It's already flooded the living room." However, at 2 in the morning, most people were fast asleep. Only a few night owls were disturbed. "What's going on, Andy Lee? Is your drain clogged? Holy crap, I think we can smell it in our place too. Everyone, wake up. Something terrible has happened. The basement is flooded. The water is almost up to the first floor." The group chat instantly exploded. More and more people were woken up, and panic spread like a virus in the dark. And I just calmly glanced at the rising water level on my phone screen, then put my phone on silent and rolled over. In the surveillance footage, those neighbors who had once been so arrogant were now standing at their doors in their pajamas, panic-stricken and helpless against the spreading sewage in the corridor. Screams, curses, and the cries of children, mixed with the sound of the wind and rain outside, formed an absurd symphony. It was very noisy, but I felt that it was the most beautiful music I had heard in 3 years. I pulled the covers over my head and went back to sleep. Good night, my dear neighbors. I hope you enjoy this night of celebration after your victory. The sky brightened. The rain had lessened, but it hadn't stopped. The entire building was enveloped in an indescribable stench, like walking into a giant, open-air toilet. I put on the high-top rain boots I had prepared long ago and opened the door. The scene before me was nothing short of spectacular. The corridor was a mess, with about 10 centimeters of murky sewage. All sorts of disgusting garbage, plastic bags, and even some unidentifiable filth floated on the surface of the water. On the walls, clear yellow watermarks were visible. The first floor had been completely devastated, with sewage backing up into every household, flooding living rooms and bedrooms without exception. All the neighbors were awake, standing at their doors, their faces grimmer than the sky outside. Drowsiness gave way to sheer terror, last night's revelry to this morning's wails. The basement was the worst of it. It had been utterly transformed into a colossal septic tank. The doors of all the storage units were warped from the soaking, the filthy water rising above the locks. Oh my God, my new appliances! A blood-curdling scream came from Annie Jean. She stumbled to the door of her storage unit, staring at the iron door submerged in sewage, and completely fell apart. The refrigerator, the TV, the washing machine I bought for my son's wedding. They're all in there. She collapsed into the filthy water, beating the ground with her hands and sobbing uncontrollably. Snot and tears mingled, smearing her makeup. The leader, who had been so imperious and commanding just the night before last, now looked as pathetic as a helpless child. The other neighbors were no better off. My stamp collection of 20 years. It's all ruined. Our family's winter quilts, and the keepsakes from when the kids were little. The leftover flooring and tiles from the renovation, they're all trash now. Cries, curses, and sighs rose and fell. The spoils of victory they had been celebrating yesterday had now become the sewage soaking their precious belongings. I stood calmly at the top of the second-floor stairs, an aloof spectator enjoying this farce of their own making. Watching their possessions soak in the sewage, the looks of pain, despair, and regret on their faces were more real than any movie. And I felt not the slightest ripple of emotion. In fact, I almost wanted to laugh. This is human nature. When disaster doesn't strike them personally, they can hurt others with impunity. When retribution comes, they cry more miserably than anyone. Amidst the chaos, someone finally remembered the most crucial question. The property management. Where the hell is the property manager? Quick, call Manager Lou. Someone immediately dialed the property manager's number, but all that came from the receiver was a cold. The user you have dialed is switched off. He was unreachable. This outcome plunged the already panicked neighbors into deeper despair. How could this happen? It's never flooded like this before, no matter how hard it rained. Yeah, it's so strange. Why isn't the water draining? This isn't rainwater. This is goddamn sewage. They all chattered at once, but couldn't pinpoint the root of the problem. They were like a swarm of headless flies, bumping around in the stinking hallway. Just then, a faint but clear voice cut through the noisy crowd. Is it because that water pump was removed? It was little Wong. He stood at the edge of the crowd, his face pale, his voice uncertain, yet tinged with a dawning realization. That sentence, like a bolt of lightning, struck everyone to the core. The previously chaotic hallway instantly fell deathly silent. Everyone froze. The wailing Auntie Zhang stopped her sobbing. The cursing man shut his mouth. Everyone's eyes were wide with the same expression. Shock, bewilderment, then the slow creep of fear and regret. That's right, the pump. The piece of junk they had called a source of noise and an illegal structure. The thing they had forced me to dismantle with my own hands 2 days ago. It turned out that wasn't just an ordinary, privately installed water pump. It was the building's only sewage pump. It was the guardian angel of this old building, the only thing still working diligently to keep them from being submerged in their own filth. And they had killed their guardian angel with their own hands. The air seemed to solidify. No one spoke. There was only the pitter-patter of the rain outside the window and the gurgling of the sewage in the basement. Every sound was a merciless taunt to their stupidity and ignorance. I stood on the stairs, watching their faces turn from red to white, then from white to a sickly green. The frustration that had been bottled up inside me for 2 days finally blissfully dissipated. I could even feel the corners of my mouth turning up. After the dead silence came an even greater panic. When the neighbors finally connected the dots between the disaster before them and the victory of 2 days prior, the last bit of color drained from their faces. They finally understood what a foolish thing they had done. So what do we do now? Quick, put the pump back. As soon as the thought arose, all eyes, in a single motion, turned to me. Those gazes no longer held the arrogance and accusation of 2 days ago. Instead, they were filled with pleading, with hope, with the feverish desperation of someone clutching at their last straw. They were no longer the army of justice here to besiege me, but sinners on a pilgrimage. The next second, the crowd surged towards my door again like a tide. Only this time, they weren't here to block my door, but to beg at it. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking was rapid, yet cautious. Leading them was still Annie Zhang. At this moment, she had completely lost her previous arrogance. Her messy hair was plastered to her face, her clothes were stained with mud, and fresh tear tracks streaked her cheeks. She looked 10 years older. Little Lin, Master Lin, are you home? Her voice trembled, thick with tears, and her form of address had changed from Lin Imo to Little Lin, and even Master Lin. I leisurely opened the door, leaned against the frame, and looked at the familiar face outside, which was now etched with humility. Auntie Zhang, is something the matter? I asked, feigning surprise. Oh, Little Lin, we were wrong. We were truly wrong. With a thud, Auntie Zhang nearly fell to her knees, but was hastily held up by the people beside her. She cried and shouted, her voice shrill. It was us who were blind and failed to recognize a great person. It was us whose hearts were clouded by greed. I'm begging you, please have a heart and help us. Put the pump back. Yes, Little Lin, we know we were wrong. Look at how flooded the building is. If you don't install it again, we're all done for. As long as you're willing to help, we'll do anything you ask. Outside the door, a crowd of anxious and regretful faces pressed together, all begging at once. 2 days ago, they had used the same lineup to force me to dismantle the pump. 2 days later, they used the same lineup to beg me to install the pump. Truly the blackest comedy in the world. I looked at them, slowly spread my hands, and put on an innocent and helpless expression. My dear neighbors, you can't blame me for this. I began to speak slowly, my voice not loud, but clear enough for everyone to hear. That pump, wasn't it you who told me to dismantle it? When I was taking it apart, I asked you all. You all said yes, you were sure, 100% sure. I paused, looking at their instantly pale faces, and continued. Besides, you all saw it. I had to forcibly disassemble it with tools. Many of the parts were hammered out of shape just to get them off, and some of the fragile plastic connectors shattered completely. I pointed to the pile of cold scrap metal in the yard. You see? It's just a pile of scrap now. You want to put it back together? Impossible. The word impossible, like a heavy hammer, struck everyone's heart. Annie Zhang's eyes rolled back, and this time she truly collapsed, mumbling, "It's over. It's all over." Despair, like the sewage water, completely flooded the residents of the entire building. Looking at the faces outside, which had turned from regret to utter despair, I felt not a shred of pity. Wails, cries, and mutual accusations rose up again like a boiling pot of rotten congee. This is all your fault. If you hadn't led the charge, this never would have happened. Someone started blaming Annie Zhang. What's the use of saying that now? Weren't you also making a fuss right along with us? Auntie Zhang immediately retorted. The crowd began to fight amongst themselves, and the scene once again descended into chaos. I cleared my throat, and the chaotic scene fell silent once more. All eyes focused on me again, filled with a final, faint glimmer of hope. It can't be reinstalled. I looked at them, then changed my tone. However, everyone held their breath. It's not impossible for me to fix it. This sentence rekindled the light in their ashen eyes. But I said, my tone heavy. The smile vanished from my face, replaced by an unprecedented seriousness. I have a few conditions. Never mind a few. We'd agree to dozens, a man shouted eagerly. I held up one finger. First, whoever led the charge, organized the petition, and threatened me while recording on their phone. Step forward now and give me a public apology in front of everyone. My gaze shot directly at Annie Zhang and the young man who had been recording. Annie Zhang's face instantly turned the color of liver, her lips trembling, unable to speak. The young man, meanwhile, subconsciously hid his phone behind his back. Ignoring their reactions, I held up a second finger. Second, this pump is a public utility that serves the entire building, correct? No one dared to speak, but they all nodded subconsciously. Then on what grounds should it be installed in my yard, leaving me to bear all the electricity costs and routine maintenance alone? Is my yard a public toilet? Am I some kind of selfless saint? My voice suddenly rose, carrying 3 years of pent-up anger. So if you want to fix it, fine. This pump and all future potential costs, including buying a new one, repairs, and electricity bills, will be split evenly among all 30 households in this building. Furthermore, for the past 3 years, the electricity costs for this pump and my labor for its maintenance have totaled 12,000 yuan. You will reimburse me for that amount right now. If you're short by even a single penny, you can all continue to soak in sewage. As soon as these two conditions were laid out, the crowd erupted. A public apology, splitting the costs, and even paying back the money from the past 3 years? This was tantamount to skinning them alive in public, and then carving out their flesh. Looks of hesitation and indignation appeared on some people's faces. This is a bit too much, isn't it? An apology is one thing, but why so much money? Auntie Zhang, forgetting her tears, jumped up. Lin Montauk, this is extortion. Don't you go too far. Too far, I sneered. Compared to you blocking my door and pointing at my nose, accusing me of illegal construction, which is more excessive. Compared to you enjoying a clean environment while I bear all the costs alone, which is more excessive. My voice was ice cold. I'm not negotiating with you. This is a notification. Accept it or don't. You choose. It makes no difference to me. My place is on higher ground. The flooding won't reach it. With that, I made a move to close the door. No. Little Lin, we agree. We agree. A few of the first-floor residents, who had suffered the most severe damage, were the first to break. They grabbed Annie Zhang, pleading, Annie Zhang, just apologize. We'll pay the money. Our few families will pool it together. That's right. If we don't fix it soon, our homes will be ruined. Seeing them begin to fracture internally, I knew the time was ripe. The conditions of an apology and financial compensation acted like a wedge, driven into the fragile alliance of my neighbors. Those willing to pay to save their property, and those still hung up on the money and unable to swallow their pride, immediately split into two factions. They pointed fingers at each other, trading blame in a pathetic display. I watched this farce with cold eyes, knowing one final blow was needed to completely shatter their psychological defenses and expose the true mastermind. I turned back into the house, retrieved a folder from the file cabinet in my study, and returned to the doorway. I pulled a sheet of paper from the folder and waved it in front of them. It was a photocopy, the title in bold black font. Notice to the owners of Building 10 regarding the installation of a sewage booster pump. You all might have forgotten, so let me remind you. My voice was calm and clear. 3 years ago, because our building is on low-lying ground and the sewage pipe design was flawed, the basement was prone to flooding during the rainy season. To solve this, the property management company proposed a solution to install a sewage booster pump in the yard of my first-floor unit, which is at the lowest point. I pointed to the text on the copy and read aloud. This equipment will be procured and installed by the property management company. The cost of the equipment and subsequent operational and maintenance fees will be paid out of the property management fees, with no additional burden on the owners. I looked up, my gaze sweeping across each of their stunned faces. This notice was posted on the bulletin board downstairs for a full month 3 years ago. I imagine everyone here has seen it, right? A dead silence fell over the crowd. Some looked as though a light had just dawned on them, while others hung their heads in shame. Of course, they had seen it. They had just habitually forgotten information that was not in their favor, only remembering that the pump was in my yard and that the pump was noisy. I flipped to the last page of the document and showed them the signature at the bottom. Everyone looked closely. Who was it that signed this document in agreement and affixed the property management company's official seal? All eyes focused on the flamboyant signature, Manager Liu. So, I said, word by word, this pump is the property of the management company. Its operational costs should have been borne by them. I have paid the electricity bills for 3 years on behalf of the property management, on behalf of all of you, and serve as a free repairman for 3 years. And what did I get in return? You blocking my door, calling my property an illegal structure, and try to force me to tear it down. You tell me, who should I be settling this account with? The moment the truth was revealed, the neighbors were utterly dumbfounded. The expressions on their faces shifted from remorse and unwillingness to the anger of being deceived and used. It was the property management. It was that bastard manager Lou. He tricked us. He used us as his pawns. No wonder his phone was off, and he was unreachable yesterday. He knew this would happen. The flames of anger were instantly ignited. This time, the spearhead was not pointed at me, but at the property manager who had been hiding behind the scenes, manipulating everyone. Manager Lou. They finally understood what a foolish and pathetic role they had played in this whole fiasco. They weren't partners in justice. They were just a bunch of pitiable executioners used by the property manager as free labor and a human shield. The neighbors' anger, like sewage that had been blocked for a long time, found an outlet and erupted in an instant. Holding the copies of the letter to all owners that I had given them, a large group of them charged toward the property management office. The situation had completely blown up. With the collective protest of the owners and the huge financial losses, the property management company could no longer play deaf and dumb. In the afternoon, Manager Lou, who had been missing for a day and a night, finally appeared downstairs under pressure from the head office. He was wearing a sharp suit, his hair slicked back with pomade, but his sallow complexion and puffy eyes betrayed his sorry state. The moment he appeared, he was surrounded by the furious neighbors. Manager Lou, you have to give us an explanation. What about our losses? This is all your fault. Manager Lou was clearly an old hand at this. Faced with the incensed crowd, not only did he not panic, but he put on a pained and heartbroken expression. He first placated the crowd with a few words, promising that the management would deal with the backed-up water as soon as possible. Then, he changed the subject, pointing the spear directly at me, standing not far away. Neighbors, I understand how you all feel. However, the cause of this incident was Mr. Lin in 101, who disregarded the interests of the entire building and dismantled public facilities without authorization. If he hadn't made a mountain out of a molehill and escalated the conflict between neighbors, how could today's situation have occurred? He was trying to pull the same old trick to push me into opposition with everyone again. A few of the less clear-headed neighbors indeed showed looks of hesitation again. Auntie Zhang, as if grasping at a lifeline, immediately chimed in. Right? He's the one who dismantled it. Manager Lou, you have to stand up for us. I looked at Manager Lou's greasy face, so adept at twisting right and wrong, and sneered inwardly. So you finally decided to show up. I didn't argue with him. I just calmly took my phone out of my pocket and pressed the play button. A clear recording echoed through the deathly silent corridor from the phone speaker. It was the phone call between me and Manager Lou from 3 days ago. In the recording, Manager Lou's voice was smooth yet impatient. Little Lin, I know about the pump in your yard. There have been quite a few complaints from the neighbors recently. Look, we're all trying to maintain neighborly harmony. This pump is indeed noisy. The neighbors have opinions, and it doesn't look good. You figure it out, be flexible. In short, don't cause trouble for us in property management, all right? The recording wasn't long, but every word was like a resounding slap across the faces of Manager Lou and Annie Jean. You figure it out. Don't cause trouble for us in property management. This kind of suggestive, responsibility-dodging rhetoric completely exposed his ugly nature of inaction and his desire to divert the disaster. The truth was now more than just revealed. It had been stripped naked and thrown under the scorching sun. Everyone heard it loud and clear. Manager Lou's face turned deathly pale in an instant, and fine beads of cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a single word, his eyes filled with incredulous terror. He probably never imagined that this IT guy, who looked so gentle and honest, would have such a move up his sleeve. The scene fell silent. I turned off the recording, put the phone back in my pocket, and looked at him calmly. Now it was my turn. Manager Lou, I began, my voice not loud, but carrying immense weight. Do you still think I was making a mountain out of a molehill and escalating the conflict? The recording was irrefutable evidence. Manager Lou's final struggle turned into a deafening self-humiliation. He stood there, ashen-faced, like a clay statue drained of all spirit. The way the neighbors looked at him had changed from anger to utter contempt and disgust. They had finally seen the true face of this property manager who spoke of benevolence and morality. What happened next had little to do with me. Faced with undeniable evidence, the head office, in order to quell the incident, quickly made a decision. Manager Lou was fired on the spot and was required to bear the primary responsibility for compensation for the sewage backflow incident. The new car he had just bought and was planning to trade in was probably a lost cause. And those neighbors also paid the price for their foolishness. Annie Zhang and a few other families who had led the trouble and had the most arrogant attitudes were forced to go door to door to apologize publicly under immense pressure from public opinion and their own financial losses. They stood at my door, in front of everyone, bowed to me, and said, "I'm sorry." That scene was more satisfying to me than any compensation. As for the repair costs, according to the terms I proposed, Annie Zhang and the other few households bore the brunt of it, while the rest was shared equally among the other neighbors. They also transferred to me the full 12,000 yuan for the electricity and maintenance fees from the past 3 years. The moment the money arrived, I felt no joy, only a sense of relief. This wasn't compensation. It was what I was owed. With this money, I ordered a brand new, German-imported, ultra-quiet submersible sewage pump online. 2 days later, the new pump arrived. In front of everyone in the building, I personally installed and tested it. Witnessed by the representatives of all the building's owners, we signed a brand new public facilities maintenance agreement, which clearly stipulated in black and white the ownership of the water pump, maintenance responsibilities, and the method of cost sharing. The last page of the agreement held the signatures of 30 households. When I pressed the start button of the new water pump, it only emitted an extremely faint operating sound, almost imperceptible if you didn't listen closely. The sewage in the basement began to be rapidly pumped away. A farce had finally come to an end. The water pump was installed. A professional cleaning company was hired for the basement, cleaning it back and forth several times, but that faint, lingering stench seemed impossible to completely eliminate for a long time. Just like the cracks this incident left in the neighborhood relationships, which could never be mended. My life returned to tranquility, even more so than before. When I encountered neighbors in the hallway, they no longer greeted me with the same enthusiasm as before, nor would they turn a blind eye to me. They would stop from a distance, looking at me with complicated expressions, then give an awkward smile and hurry past me. In their eyes, there was awe, embarrassment, and regret, but no longer any intimacy. Ever since her public apology, Annie Zhang had not stepped out of her home. I heard her son had a huge fight with her because the home appliances for his marital home were ruined, and her position as the leader of the square dancing group had been taken by someone else. Xiaowan would occasionally chat with me on WeChat about trivial matters, like the weather or a newly released movie. We became the only friends in this building who could still talk to each other. I sold the pile of old water pump parts that had been dismantled in the courtyard as scrap metal, and then bought some flower seeds and soil. I planted roses, sunflowers, and baby's breath in the courtyard. On sunny afternoons, I liked to move a lounge chair into the courtyard, drinking coffee and watching the flowers and plants sway in the wind. That brand new, imported water pump was placed in a corner of the courtyard. It worked quietly, like a silent and loyal guard, protecting the cleanliness and tranquility of this building. It was more like a boundary monument, a monument forged from sewage, quarrels, and ugly faces. It clearly drew a line. On this side of the line was my respect and peace. On the other side of the line was their responsibility and consequence. From then on, we would not interfere with each other's lives.